Da 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 da. What's my good chair? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. Let people know I've gone live. And in the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And I have been in the inside, you guys. It's right in at one point when I started my brand, I started off in that urban exploration, unaware that there was anything beyond what I was doing in that moment. And I wasn't even sure of what I was doing in that moment. It's just I felt that I needed to. And somebody who always follows her own directive, her own curiosity, I kind of moved into a not a new way of thinking, not even a new way of believing, because that all kind of compacts and compounds through the process. But I really felt that there was some kind of leadership for me. There was some kind of follow me, follow me. And whether or not, I kind of followed off in the wrong directions, and I've done that many times over the course of my life. I have really put the wrench in my own life so badly, but sometimes we do that unintentionally because we're avoiding a difficult moment or a problem or something we don't want to do. And it makes it easy, right? And then we come to depend on that to get us through those little kinks in life that really do mess us up. But the idea is for us to find the solutions for those problems, not to avoid them, right? And for a good part of my life in looking for ways to make it bearable, make it comfortable, make it believable, right? I've had to kind of dumb myself down a little bit. I've actually had to allow myself be willing to be not necessarily put in my place, but allowed myself to be course corrected in a lot of beliefs that I felt were true. And I beat myself up on that. And I might not have been the instigator in there, but I sure as hell I took that baton and I ran with that. I ran with that. So a little bit of what I'm doing, a little bit of majority of what I'm doing here is resolving that for myself. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to accomplish that, but I believe that it is in my good intent, in my way of making amends, my way of welcoming myself to the party, right? Because I really felt like, for the most part, that I was in it by myself. That people, if they didn't see things the way I saw them, then I was the one that needed to cave in my ideas, in my beliefs, and just go by somebody else's directives, right? And like I said, it wasn't like I believed everything, but growing up in a household that majority rules, and because my ideas were always, unless it was something fun and adventurous that somebody else would, right, have fun in because they couldn't think up these ideas themselves. For the most part, it was just me on my own. And you know, I surprise myself consistently about how much I'm able to not bear, but how much I can bear, how much I can be challenged in what I do. And I'm not doing anything that I don't think anybody else can do. Um Lots of people could do, right? Because what I do, I'm taking advantage of this AI learning. But this AI learning has a lot of side branches in it. And because it can be daunting, sometimes we stick in those realms that we're comfortable in. Just before I came live today, I was just checking my camera and I went, oh my goodness, what did I do now? And I went and I says, okay, do I just use this camera and just go in and do my live the way it is? And I said, no, right? We've been working with a different camera, and these issues and problems are going to arise. And how are you going to get better at what you do if you just cave in, right away? Just say, oh, okay, that didn't work out. And the next thing you know, I'm pulling cords and going back to the old ways. And it's not a matter of going backwards anymore, right? We're always moving forward now. In this age of AI learning, I think is asking us to move in those ebb and flows of what is just beginning. We're just in the beginning stages. It's all of this is so new. Like so new that I remember the first calculator. I was in grade 10 when the calculator came out. Grade 10 in high school. And if you got caught in high school with a calculator, you would be booted out for at least a couple of weeks for sure. But at that time, not too many people could afford a calculator. They were like $60, $70. They had a 3-foot electrical cord on them. They weren't digital, but it was in the beginning, right? In that numerology and being able to, what do they call it? Simulate, right? That combination of different technologies and different ideas and coming up with something magnificent. And I think, these small things were the lead in to actually creating magnificent imaginary fantasy, right? And it makes it so, right, people in my industry don't really need to come in front of the camera, that they can create um, uh, creatively, artistically, digitally, right, with AI as a partner in that content that would be visually, mentally, but I don't know emotionally connected, because emotionally we need that interaction with others, right? Those teachers, those mentors. We need to physically feel out somebody. And I'm guilty myself. I've been in that content. We were talking about it a little bit yesterday. I've been in that AI content where they create something digitally and they present it, and it's beautiful and it's curious and it's interesting. Even the insights, even though it's voiced over by something digital, it's it's enticing, it is knowledgeable, it is confident and exact in its presentation. But I'm a human, right? And I don't want to be digitally perfect. Right? Maybe in the generations going forward, but in this life for myself, I'm human and I want to have this beautiful, that I know can be beautiful, amazing experience that I can create in that imperfectness, right? Not to somebody else's timeline, not to somebody else's perspectives, not somebody else's ideas, that that this is something that I'm creating for me, but I'm bringing it to the table in that optimistic idea that it might be at the very least interesting to somebody else, right? And so things change, right? Things are always changing. And I'm grateful that, that I'm still here, though my brand and what I bring to the table can be very different than what I brought to the table when I first started out. But that's the idea. I was just starting out. I had no idea of my capabilities, right? Or to the possibilities. And that took a lot, and it still takes a lot of experimenting and digging in and allowing my curiosity to take me places, but not take me places that don't fit in a life that I want to create for myself, right? Because otherwise, that would be again directed by something or someone else. And I know we all, right? We all have to answer to somebody. And that's the truth. But each one of us gets to feel out, right? And make those choices as to who or what we're truly going to answer to, right? What I'm answering to, I believe, is so far, right? I do feel very behind in things quite often, but that's I, right? And, after me, there will be another I, right? And I my idea, Cindy's idea is that I make that a little bit easier for the next one because it was kind of tough, and there's got to be better ways to go about, right? Showing up the way that we should be, the way we want to, right? And to be able to do that in a way that's not just healthy, right? Not just healthy for me, but that also shows me as the evidence that it can be done. And that's the biggest thing. That's right, that it can be done because lots of people are running on less than what I have. And I don't have much, but right? But if I can do it, then maybe somebody else can do it. And what am I doing? I'm moving I'm moving forward. I'm creating the best human being I possibly can. I'm making some movement for myself. I'm making some little bit of course corrections. I am making some choices to dictate how big those cranks are going to be in my life, or if I can just make small adjustments and still be in a spot where I'm supposed to be, right? And I think in the end, that's all we could all hope for, right? And, you know, I'm not a big fan of the roller coasters, of the ups and downs. And I am grateful that the ups and downs are consistently stable when I'm in them, meaning, right, that I am in them and I'm managing them fine, that I'm emotionally, physically, and mentally able to manage, whether it's amazing or whether it's challenging or whether it's heartbreaking or full of grief, right? Those are the challenges, right, of moving forward. And it's not about being cold in that, right? It's not about not having those highs and those emotions, but that we're able to have our lives reflect them in those moments, right? Not to think that everything is going all haywire and down the chute, when in actuality things are moving okay, right? Lots of times we are our own instigators when we pick up those batons. We picking up those batons, all those lessons that we learned from others, we're picking them up and we're using them on ourselves. And if we can just take a moment and say, am I picking up this baton, or am I picking up a different sport, a different challenge, a different idea of what's right for me? I'm all proud of myself in that, because that's a realization for me, right? That's a belief for me. And when I can come to the table and spew that and believe that, right? Because it's the right thing, right? It's the true thing. And maybe not for everybody, but for me, right? It's everything. It's making it so that I just have to do those small adjustments, that I don't have to have my life cranked at 180 degrees into something different, or worse yet, a 360 that lands me right where I started, and I have to start all over again. Okay, you guys, I don't know where that was coming from, but I'll come back into my live and I'll watch it for myself, because I'll know for sure there's a lesson in that for me. And we're just going to grab a card here. 54 powerful words. If you haven't hung out with me before, 54 powerful words. I just go into it for a couple of minutes. I wish that, because it's the title on my live, that everybody has to wait until the end of my live to find out what the topic is all about. But the thing is, when I come in, I let go in that, and whatever the conversation is when we pop in, that's what the conversation is. And I offer it up that time. And you guys know I don't rush through it. I don't say, well, this is 15 minutes and we're cut off in 15 minutes. I don't say a half an, if it takes an hour, it takes an hour. Sometimes I get in those moods where I'm just like, right? But other times they are quite short, and I'll look up and I'll go, oh my goodness, that was only 20 minutes. What happened there? Oh, there was a lesson. But not every day has to be a lesson. Sometimes it's just in that company of each other, right? That we can hold each other up and, right, spend a little time together before we called it a day, or just have it reflected that, you know what, you're not the only one who has crappy days. Other people have crappy days, but in those crappy days we can find those moments, right? And it helps to balance things out so that things don't have to be up and down, because that's worse than anything, right? I like that idea. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, right? Whistle while you work, singing in the rain, right? And that's what gets us into trouble because when it starts raining, when life starts pounding on us and stuff, right? We let it get to us and we get all negative and grouchy and we rub it off on everybody else. And once you leave yourself open to that, you're leaving yourself open to that. And it might be something that you have a hard time moving out of. And sometimes it just gets worse and worse and worse until decisions and choices are made that, right, you never thought would happen. And so curious. Move on, Cindy. Okay, you guys. Let's just pick the card. And we're just going to go into it for a couple of minutes and then we're going to call it a night. One more day. It's Friday. I take Saturdays off. I'm not online except in lessons or studies or lectures or something. And usually I try to get some Mother Nature in, even if I'm just going to go for a walk and get a cup of coffee or something. Um, Next week I'm going to spend some time with my sister because I'm running out of stock as a reseller and keeping the roof over my head, right? I need to get some stock in line. So me and my sister are going to go out next week and see if we can score a few things. Okay, you guys, let's just go in here and grab a card. Oh, here's a good one. I haven't pulled this one very much, and it's surprising because this word is in my deck twice. I have two cards with this word on. Okay, it says acceptance is the word. Acceptance is the word. Acceptance is understanding we don't have all the answers, right? And we have to remember that. Remember what I said? I was just about to spew off into something, into a topic that I hadn't even gotten a handle on yet, but because I was excited about it, I wanted to share it. And I could be sharing something that's not true, right? Hello, dear. Thank you so much for popping in. Thank you. Yeah, acceptance is understanding that we don't all have the answers. And the thing is, there are people out there that do feel that they have all the answers, but we can only be an absolute expert in one aspect of our life. So maybe in having all the answers, maybe you would only have the answers in one aspect. Like you like wrestling, so you would be the expert on wrestling, right? Figure skating, what have you. But you can't possibly be the expert on absolutely everything that's going on. That's a really egoic, kind of narcissistic kind of idea, right? And, for myself, growing up in those dynamic families, right, with different personalities going on, I right? It was difficult sometimes, right? In butting heads with people who felt like they were right. And they would swear to the truth. They would fight to the death for their truth, which was an untruth. And I would be determined, being the empath, right? I would always have to prove that this is where I get it wrong, wanting to butt heads with these people. And I would get the evidence. And that's the wrong thing to do. That's the wrong way to go about interacting with narcissists. And, it's not even that I didn't have friends who were narcissists. I did. I had people in my life that I cared about who were very controlling and narcissistic in their personalities, but I didn't know better, right? I knew they were lying or fibbing or stretching the truth, but you're not going to shove that stuff down my throat. And I would go out of my way to prove them right. I would get the evidence, I would get the witnesses, and I would face them ready to go to battle. And I would say my spew, and they would brush it off as nothing. I didn't say that, right? I go totally opposite way. You cannot win in that. You can only lose, because the thing is, in disrespecting, because that's what you're doing, right? Because a narcissist knows when they're lying, when they're doing something wrong, when they're hurting somebody, right? But they are so aggressive and so determined in what they do. Like, it's hard for people to come back at that. But if you come back at that, you can be guaranteed you got a non-friend forever, meaning you've ticked somebody right off. And right, and they take this so personally. I know this, that it's humiliation, right? They feel embarrassed by it. They feel singled out by that. And that's the worst thing you can do to somebody who has built up these personas, because that's what they are. They're personas to protect them, right? That it's it's damaging to them, and that would never want to be my intent, even if somebody is a little bit of a jerk and a little bit, stretching the truth a little bit. Who am I? Is it such a big deal for me that I need to prove myself right? Right? Not everything has to be a battle. And that's one thing that I learned, right? That I didn't always have to prove myself. Sometimes you just have to accept the way that you believe, the way that you live, right? Those values that you have, and just let others, right, to their own, without smudging, is that a word? Smudging in their face, right? And creating an unkindness is what it is, right? I feel that, because I sympathize, because you know they have the kind of experiences that I had when I was a kid, right? You know that the possibility, through trauma, you can swing either towards controlling and narcissistic behaviors, or you can swing to the meek and to the cautious and the unwilling to step forward, right, aspect. And I had two parents and the two opposite extremes, and grateful to have the insights of that. I wish I didn't, right? But it is what it is. I earned those badges, and I will utilize those those badges, and I'm not utilizing them to beat on one aspect of an extreme, but to empathize with that, because I could have swung that way in my pain, right? But I swung the opposite way. But I'm the exact same person as the makeup. I've gone through the exact same experience, right? Not word for word, but the same pain, the same neglect, the same betrayal, the same heartbreak, the same grief, the same dejection and rejection, right? And it wasn't that I, right? Sometimes I wish, right, I could all show them and be, CEO of some great big company, rather than, okay, that's what I am. I accept that. I got the word accept. Don't want to trail too far off the branch of the tree, right? The trunk of the tree. But I accept that that's what I am. And that led me into a different experience, right? Not out to prove myself right if I could, but that was only because, I had examples in my life as to how to do it, right? But there are lots of people out there that wouldn't raise a voice, that wouldn't cross exam, who wouldn't say that's not true, right? And being the truth teller that I am, that wasn't the experience that I had. I butted heads with that. And I could say, you know, I I'm I'm I learned differently. It took me a while, but that's not to say that that's really the case, because in our experiences in our life, that's going to dictate whether I'm going to butt heads again, because I'm not a true believer in turning the other cheek. I never have been, and in turning the not turning the other cheek, that sometimes changes an aspect of somebody's idea, and they'll say, "Oh, right, better not say that to Cindy because she'll let me have it," right? And it's not an unkind way, but in a way that at the very least, that there's a listen, there's an understanding, that they know that somebody's paying attention, and they'd be less likely to go off and do that to somebody else. Because that's the thing with acceptance. Once you accept that, they will just carry on doing these things, right? Projecting that to us. And we pick that up and we gobble it up like it's truth in that acceptance, right? So we have to be careful to remember that we don't have all the answers, and nobody else has all the answers either. To accept that, in knowing that we can maybe allow ourselves to be pulled in to different conversations, different experiences, right? Different possibilities, and then be able to make choices within that for ourselves, right? Not necessarily for anybody else, right? But for ourselves, not in a way that says, I know better, or, I'm going to be my own handler. I'm going to be my own person that's going to dictate all the rules and how to, right? How to move along. That I can actually be a contributor to my own life, right? By letting other people be the example for me to say, oh my goodness, look what they did. If they can do it, maybe I can too. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming into my live tonight. I so much appreciate it. For those of you who pop in later, put your feet up. I hope it's not too much, right? I don't know if you leave it for the morning to take it in, or you take it in and you just kind of ponder it in your dreams, which leads me to who I just got a post on the topic of people who don't dream. I'm not a big dreamer, so I want to I want to watch this video and see what they've got to say on that. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. See you tomorrow.